Welcome to Caribou, Maine. This is Christina Kane-Gibson with the city's Events and Marketing Department. We know you'll be fascinated with the pioneer history of our community, so we've enhanced a walking tour that was created a few years ago by the Caribou Sesquicentennial Committee. This tour will take you from the BikeMaine village to our Sweden Street event. Let's start here at Collins Pond Park. If you look across the pond, you will see the back of the S.W. Collins complex. This business has been family-owned and operated in Caribou since 1844. It was started by S.W. Collins and Washington Vaughn. The two took advantage of a Maine law that provided 2 lots of land for every mill built in Aroostook County. The partners first built a grist mill on a site we shall soon see, and later built a sawmill that saw continuous use until well into the 20th century. In the 1850s, the partnership dissolved peaceably, and their holdings and land were divided among the two. Collins took the sawmill and the lumbering business and the land north of Caribou Stream, and Vaughn the grist mill and the land south of the stream. It's hard to imagine, but all of the land that now makes up downtown Caribou west of Main Street was once owned by these two men. The Collins store has always been on the site of the present building, even in the earliest days. The Collins family has always been civic-minded, serving on boards, councils, and commissions. Later, you'll have a chance to meet U.S. Senator Susan Collins during dinner and hear her speak at our Sunday on Sweden Street event downtown. Senator Collins's Caribou office is also located just a few blocks from the family store. As you walk along the path towards Dragon Park, you are heading towards Grove Street and the original dam. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Please turn left on Grove Street at the end of the path. You may press pause at this time and resume the video when you reach the street. Grove Street is one of the oldest streets in Caribou and contains the oldest frame house in town. This white home was built in 1845. It was a bunkhouse for Vaughn and Collins and was connected to the sawmill by a footbridge that ran across the dam you can still see holding back the waters of Collins Pond. The dam was constructed by creating boxes of wood that were then filled with rocks. This style of dam is called a crib dam. It wasn't until this year that the original wood structure of the dam gave way and water from the pond ran into the stream. The city is currently working with the Parks and Recreation Department and the Army Corps of Engineers to make the necessary repairs. One of the early renters of this old house was David Adams, who arrived in Caribou in 1844. Dorcas Adams, David's wife, cooked for the Collins employees for a while, before Adams built a house on South Main Street. Please pause the video until you reach the next destination, Caribou's first church on the north corner of Grove and South Main. The Union Meeting House was built in 1867, now the home of the Unitarian Universalist Church. It was the first religious building built in Caribou. Before its construction, services were held in schoolhouses and in barns. Sylvester Washburn and George Ellington are given credit as the builders. A.M. York and James Page also had a hand in this design and construction. In the building's early life, all denominations worshipped here. The Baptists were the first to break away and build their own building in 1880. The church had a raised platform in the back for the choir, so the worshipers had to turn around to watch the choir, and then turn back to face the preacher. Holes were cut under each pew, and a piece of tin was placed over each hole to regulate the heat for each worshiper. The Universalist parish was organized in 1875. Now, please turn to the home opposite the church on the south corner of Grove and South Main. This corner is the site of Caribou's first hotel and tavern, built in 1847 by Washington Vaughn and run by his father-in-law, Joseph Bickford. It was called the Bickford Tavern. After Bickford's death, Vaughn sold the house and it changed hands a variety of times before 1910, when Frank Hughes purchased, tore down, and moved the home to the Madawaska Road. There is a rumor that the original structure still exists on the site where it was reconstructed. In 1910, the current structure you see was finished as a boarding house and continued its tradition of housing visitors for more than 170 years. At this time, we'll take a short trip up the hill. Please head south to 658 Main Street towards the Veterans Memorial and Nylander Museum, to the building that is currently the home of H&R Block. You may pause the video here until you reach your destination. For 57 years, this location was the home of the Caribou Motor Company, a Ford dealership. At one time, it was the oldest Ford Mercury dealership in New England. H.D. Collins, son of the first S.W. Collins, was the original Ford dealer in Caribou, and he set up shop on Record Street, which is now the post office parking lot. He sold the business to W.L. Oak, and in 1919 he sold it to E.F. Shaw, who changed the name to the Caribou Motor Company, and built this location in 1939. Eventually, Shaw's sons, Whit and John, took over the business, and Sheldon Scott served as vice president. A unique feature of the store was the advanced outdoor lighting system that created daylight brightness, enabling potential customers to shop at night. Your next destination is 636 Main Street. You may listen to this portion while you walk. This glorious house has long been called the Sincock House, after John Sincock, who purchased the home and the gristmill in 1874. But the house goes beyond him. It was originally built in 1860 by David Weston Adams, David Adams' son, who came to the area as a 9-year-old boy. Wes Adams enlisted in the Civil War and sold the house to Eliza Pratt, the widow of Arston Pratt, one of Caribou's earliest Civil War casualties. Arston was very wise, and before he went to the war, put the original house just beyond the bridge on the Fort Road in his wife's name so she wouldn't lose it if he died. After Arston's death, the railroad wanted to develop the land on the other side of the bridge and purchased Pratt's original home. She then purchased the Weston Adams house and moved her children there. She was a seamstress and was quite successful with her sewing business, but eventually decided the home was too much and sold it in 1874 to John Sincock. She moved to North Main Street. Sincock liked to farm as well as run his gristmill, and the building behind the garage, actually an old carriage house, is the original sheep shed. Sincock's son Edgar was the first high school graduate in Caribou and went on to become one of the first area doctors, a position he served for almost 50 years. In 1906, he greatly remodeled the house. The first thing he did was detach the back half, or L, of the house, and it was moved to Sincock Street, where it still serves a family to this day. A few years ago, the family that owns the detached piece were remodeling and found the original 2-seat privy. Edgar built the deck on the second floor for his aging mother so that she didn't have to come down to enjoy the outdoors. The slate shingles are original to the remodeling. In fact, much of the inside of the house remains unchanged from 1906 and is a glorious example of the time period. Edgar's daughter Elizabeth was a woman well before her time and had much to do with the founding of the Aroostook Savings and Loan, where her energy and determination did much to build the business. Her son, Hugh Kirkpatrick, and his wife occupy the house and are the 4th generation of that family to do so. They continue to live there today. Hugh Kirkpatrick Jr. lives just a few houses down the street and is also a current city council member and director of the Caribou Utilities District. Please cross the street safely and head back north. This home, directly across the street from the Kirkpatricks on the corner of Thomas and Main, is the next stop. Driving by this house, many would not guess that it's among the city's oldest. The house dates back to 1858 when construction began with Benjamin Barrows. Barrows soon shipped out to the Civil War, and it remained unfinished until it was purchased by Lucian Small. Small was a blacksmith and had his shop on the north side of Sweden Street, where the downtown mall is now. He owned the house since 1878 and sold it to Dr. Charles Thomas. It's been known as the Thomas House ever since. Thomas was the first graduate physician to come to Caribou, and he arrived in 1873. He taught school for a while growing his practice. He served the town for many years, and then his son and namesake served in the same capacity for many years as well. Many of our citizens were brought into this world by one of the Dr. Thomases. Around the time of World War II, George Ritchie purchased the house and is responsible for many of the renovations that make this such a beautiful home. He is remembered by many as the proprietor of Ritchie's Drugstore on the corner of Water and Main. His Coca-Cola sign can still be seen while crossing the bridge. Ritchie also owned a horse farm on the Prescott Road, and his daughter loved to ride horses and was often seen doing so in town. The house's original stable is still intact and on the right side of the garage. Now please head towards the Nylander Museum. Take a peek at the brick building behind the museum. You may pause the video until you reach your destination. This brick building was Caribou's first hospital. Dr. Jefferson Carey was another early physician in town. He was the son of a lumber baron in Holton and moved to Caribou in 1877 and set up practice. Upon his death, he left his legacy to the town by leaving the funds to build Carey Memorial Hospital. This building was the original hospital. This hospital, and the new one on the Van Buren Road, has been a tremendous asset to the town. Award-winning care isn't the only thing to brag about. Carey Medical Center is the only municipally owned hospital in the state of Maine. We all have Dr. Carey to thank for his foresight and generosity. Now it's time to visit Olaf Nylander. This location is also a selfie stop, so get those cameras ready and head inside. The Friends of the Nylander volunteers are waiting for you. Mr. Nylander was an amazing man. A son of Swedish immigrants that settled in New Sweden, he grew up on a farm there. He had an insatiable need for knowledge. His curiosity continued through his life, and he became an efficient and self-taught scientist. In his free time, he cultivated a keen interest in the natural sciences. His skills as a geologist were in demand. Olaf was engaged by the U.S. Geological Survey as a field collector. He was also contacted by the Canadian government and numerous colleges and universities to perform field research or act as a guide. Recognizing his years of community service and significant contributions to scientific exploration, the University of Maine at Orono awarded Mr. Nylander an honorary Master of Science degree in 1938. In 1939, the Nylander Museum was officially dedicated and became municipally owned, and taxpayers continue to support the museum and its preservation of northern Maine natural history. Despite efforts from the Smithsonian and the National Museum of Canada to acquire parts of the exhibits, Olaf Nylander's legacy remains intact just beyond those doors. Step inside and experience the Nylander Museum. Please pause here and enjoy exploring. Your next stop is the Pocket Park and Soldier Memorial next door. You may resume this video when you're ready. Monument Park is a place filled with Caribou history. In 1917, Ollie Fair and other Caribou residents led an effort to build a memorial for Caribou's war dead. This monument was unveiled on May 30, 1918. The Caribou chapter of the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR, a Civil War veterans group, raised the money for the flagpole and the flag. In June of 1918, James A. Lister placed a soldier's monument in the triangle, and ever since, on Memorial Day, our parade ends here, and Caribou citizens gather to hear the names read of our fallen heroes. After meeting here, residents head to the Northern Maine Veterans Cemetery on Lombard Road. If you have time to see it before heading home, it is a beautiful monument in memory of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Commissioned in 1998 by then-Governor Angus King, the monument was dedicated on June 1, 2003, and sits on 33.4 acres. Northern Maine is proud to provide an appropriate final resting place for those who have unselfishly given to their country. At this juncture, you may head back to the village to prepare for dinner, or continue on the tour to downtown. If you take Robert Street or Grove Street, you will end up back at Collins Pond Park. If you continue on to downtown, please head towards the bridge over Caribou Stream. We'll stop there. This is Caribou Stream. Across the street is our new observer deck, another selfie stop that you can visit on your way to our Sunday on Sweden Street event. Looking at the stream from this side will give you a brief history. In fact, this is where Caribou got its name. The stream was named according to legend by Alexander Cochrane's oldest son, Mark. Mark shot a caribou here when the stately animal still roamed the area. The stream became the lifeblood of the downtown area, where Alexander Cochrane built his gristmill in 1828. Many of the early settlers would not have survived without Cochrane. Later, the partnership of Collins and Vaughan built 2 mills, a gristmill, much improved over Cochrane's, and the sawmill we discussed at S.W. Collins Company. The growth of Caribou was very much a result of this partnership. Later, L.B. Holmes built the first potato starch factory in Aroostook County in the 1870s on the old Cochrane site, and that booming business did much to establish Caribou as the center of the potato growing giant that it is today. A few steps away is Water Street. Water Street is the oldest street in Caribou. It was on this street, near the bridge to Sleepers, that the aforementioned Cochrane gristmill opened in 1828. By the mid-1870s, this street was a busy one, with a blacksmith, the town's first photographer, a boarding house, and 3 different water-powered factories. Today, Caribou's Main Street and downtown team is working hard to revitalize the area. New businesses, including a carpentry shop and dog groomer, have moved in. Stay tuned for big changes from the newly commissioned team. Heading up the Main Street hill, you'll see the municipal building and police department on your right. If you look up High Street, you can see that it is one of the busiest commercial streets in Caribou. It was originally established as a residential area and was lined with stately homes and tall elm trees. Many of the homes still exist and have been converted to businesses. If you look behind the library, you'll see the Baptist Church. Built in 1880, the church has had many additions. The structure on the left-hand side of the church is the original structure. The church spire was moved from the original structure to where it stands now. The first pastor was I.E. Bill, who had an early home and farm on the Madawaska Road. Now you are standing in front of the Caribou Public Library, built between 1911 and 1912 with the aid of a grant from the famous mogul and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. It was designed by local man Schuyler Page, the son of an early pioneer, James Page. The library was designed in the Romanesque Revival style. The first librarian in the new public library was Sarah Roberts. We have a long history of library keeping in Caribou. The newer edition was opened in 1964. As we cross North Main Street, note that this is one of the earliest streets in town. It was cut as early as 1853, and soon after the road was built all the way to Van Buren, 20 miles north. The first house to be built on North Main is at the corner of Herschel and is the beautiful S.W. Collins house built in 1858 by A.M. York, the renowned builder of the time in Caribou. The house was remodeled in the late 1890s by Herschel Collins after his father passed away. Herschel took over the lumberyard at the time. The house is beautifully maintained by the Willey family and is currently a housing complex for the elderly. Sam Collins had 3 brothers who also settled in Caribou. 2 of the brothers' homes still exist. The last house on the left of North Main Street, before you get to Carey Medical Center, is the Harvey Collins house, built in 1852. The David Collins homestead can be found overlooking the Aroostook River on Limestone Street and is currently owned by Catherine Olmsted, the creator of Echoes magazine. From here, head down the Record Street Hill and turn right at the post office onto Sweden Street. Tonight's festivities will take place right here on Sweden Street. the downtown team's pride and joy, a quaint and unique Northern Maine jewel. You may pause until you reach your destination. Just ahead, you'll see a building sporting the Swedish colors of yellow and blue. This is the Powers Theater. The Powers Theater opened in 1912, as well as the Powers Block, just to the left. The original theater, at one time called the Gem Theater, was very ornate and beautifully furnished. It was built by Mr. Peter Powers, a descendant of one of Caribou's founding families. The structure just west of the Powers Theater, VMS Solutions, dates from the 1800s and was a drugstore for many years. Both buildings are currently for sale, and the downtown team is looking for exciting new businesses to take up shop. Interested in being part of Caribou's history? See a team member in the Caribou info booth in the village or at the event. As you head west, you'll pass the Caribou Theater on the left. Stop in tonight for Aroostook County themed videos from Crown of Maine Productions during the Sunday on Sweden Street event. Across the street is Sitel, a call center and one of Caribou's major employers. Next to the American Legion, you'll see the house originally built in 1880 by Frank Record. Record ran a teamster business hauling freight on 6-horse teams to Bangor and New Brunswick. Now to the corner of Sweden and Prospect. If you look north on the corner of Prospect and Herschel, you'll see the former home of Mrs. Ellis. Now an apartment house, it was built by A.M. York for Mrs. Ellis and originally stood on the present site of the Caribou Post Office. It was moved here when the post office was constructed. Mrs. Ellis came to Caribou with her husband in 1852, and they had a farm just beyond the Harvey Collins farm on the Van Buren Road. Mark and George Ellis, father and son, both died in the Civil War, and afterwards Mrs. Ellis moved to town and opened the first restaurant in Caribou from this home. As we stand on this corner of Herschel and Prospect, you can see the magnificent Gray Memorial Methodist Church. This is the second structure. The original was built in 1887 and stood across the street, roughly where the Dollar General parking lot is now. Reverend Newberg was the first minister. The large house to the right of the church is the parsonage, also built in 1887. It was also located across the street, but was moved to its present location when the new church was built. Now head past the theater towards S.W. Collins Company on Hatch Drive. We can now see the front side of the S.W. Collins complex. If you remember from earlier in the tour, the 174-year history of the S.W. Collins Company is closely linked with the history of Caribou. Both the family business and the thriving community began in recognition of the resources to be found within Maine's vast forests. It all started with lumber. U.S. Senator Susan Collins hails from this founding family and will join you for dinner back in the village. Heading past the Collins complex towards the corner of Hatch and Maine, you'll see One Vaughn Place on your right. Feel free to pause the video until you reach your destination. On this hill, Washington Vaughn made his dream come true when he built the original Vaughn House in 1860. The hotel soon became one of the finest establishments in Aroostook County. Here, Vaughn also resided with his wife and daughters on the top floor. Unfortunately, the original hotel burned just 2 years after it was built, but he built it again, even larger. The hotel was later owned by a variety of people, and many more fires plagued the establishment. The design of the building changed many times until the old hotel burned completely in 1954. The building you see here now was completed in 1957 and was the Hotel Caribou. The building is now an office complex, and inside the lobby, you can see an original Vaughn House carriage. Also, a freshwater stream was located on the property. At one time, wood piping was built to take this water down to the road, where it was stored in wooden troughs. Several years ago, during routine road construction, crews discovered the old wooden pipes. One of the original troughs can be found on the Blackstone Farm on the Fort Road. Turning south on Main Street, you will see our new overlook bridge and selfie stop. Feel free to stop now or on your way back to the Sweden Street event. On the right-hand side of the stream was a sash, door, and blind factory, first established by Sylvester Washburn in 1858 by land he purchased from Washington Vaughan. And now we are back to Grove Street. You can follow this street back to the walking trail and back to the village in Collins Pond Park. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into Caribou's early history and downtown development. City staff is working hard to grow our economic endeavors to see Caribou thrive into the future. An important part of that is recognizing our roots and remembering our history. The history of Caribou is fascinating and full of hard-working and colorful pioneers. Please visit the Caribou Public Library for more information. Be sure to visit the Caribou Historical Society on the Prescott Road. Downtown is not the only exciting location in Caribou. Just about every road has its share of lovely homes, farms, and stories. We hope you'll travel around, see the sights, and come back and visit us soon. This is Christina Kane-Gibson. Thank you for joining us.